guys, welcome back to the next part of the series. Today we're going to continue with the hands of the character. And hands, they're always tricky. However, I'm going to show you a method that I think is easy enough to work with so that we can get something that looks nice. And then, again, later on in the next chapter, we're going to go through the whole polishing process. So as you can see right here, the hand is of course made out of 4 fingers. We got the thumb, and everything starts with a box. So I'm going to start here with my trim dynamic, and I'm going to clean this stuff right here. So I'm going to create just the box for the character. Remember, another thing we can do is we can press Control Shift, change this to select lasso, and then hide this part right here and delete hidden. And if we do that, we're going to have a perfectly clean box right here. I'm going to get rid of the red color for now by clicking on the little icon right there. And we're going to clean all of this part right here. So when we take a look at a hand, and I actually have a reference right here for hands, you can see that the main section of the hand is this very bulky, boxy element. And from that box, we get the thumb and all of the other fingers. I usually like to see this as like a gloveless finger. So I'm gonna, whoa, what the hell was that? I'm gonna use move brush here. I'm gonna start pushing out where I would expect the thumb to be. I'm gonna isolate just the hand so we can work on it a little bit better. And again, I'm gonna create like a little window right here from where the thumb eventually is going to be extruding. So as you can see, it's this like a ramp. When we see it from the top, it's like this ramp where the thumb is going to be, again, extruding from. Now this character has, it's a big stylized character, so usually hands are one place where we can definitely exaggerate things a little bit more. So something like that. I'm going to use trim dynamic to trim the palm of the hand for now. Usually the back side or the bony part of the hand is very straight, like we don't have as many elements. And we have, of course, the cushions right here. You can imagine some of them, one right here for the thumb, and then one right here for the pinky, and then all of the ones that we normally have right here for the fingers. So one of the most important things right now is to make sure that the hand is in proportion with the rest of the character. And so far, I think we're in a good position. We want this to be big hands. Now, the way we're going to do the fingers is, fingers are very similar, right? The only thing that changes between fingers is the size and the scale of them, but they're actually very similar. We have phalanges, which are the little connections, and we have 3 on this 4 fingers right here, and the thumb only has 2. It might seem like the thumb has 3, but this bone that we see right here, that's actually a metacarpal. So it's a bone that goes from the carpal, from the wrist, to the fingers. So I'm going to go to my forms over here, and I'm going to select a cube. This one right here. I'm going to make this a polymesh 3D. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale the cube so that we have the first phalange right around there. We're going to dynamesh this. There we go. And I'm going to trim dynamic the borders. Because again, usually, let's turn on, oh, actually, I'm going to scale this back in. Keep it as square as possible. And this is going to go like this. So usually, again, the outer part of the fingers are going to be really sharp, really hard because we got the bones. And on the underside, we're going to have the soft part. So I'm going to trim dynamic this upper part right here, indicating this sort of bony effect that we would expect to have. And then as we go to this side, I'm also going to trim this, but I'm going to trim it a little bit softer. So we're going to go for a sort of patty tissue. So something like this. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. We're just doing a block-in. And we're going to get this right here. Kind of looks like a sausage. So there we go. Something like this. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press W. And with Alt, I'm going to duplicate, sorry, Control Alt. I'm going to duplicate this thing. But I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. How much smaller? About 0.9, I would say, is a good number. And very important, I'm going to move the pivot point back. And I'm going to rotate the fingers slightly. One of the things that I recommend is to always sculpt the fingers slightly bent. It's usually better for the sculpt, it looks better, and for the riggers as well, it makes it a little bit easier for them. So usually the next phalange, so you can see we have this first phalange right here, and the next one is a little bit, they say that there's a golden ratio sort of thing, but it's a little bit smaller than the other one, so something like that. Then I'm gonna do this again and make it smaller again, rotate it again so that we can get a little bit of a curvature. And this is what we're going to have. So I know it looks very weird, but this is the basic shape that we need. Remember to do other groups right now. And we're going to dynamesh again. So on this top part, we're going to have the knuckles. I'm going to add the volume there for the knuckles. Okay. And especially when you bend the fingers, the knuckles do push out a little bit more. And on the bottom part, we can start playing a little bit with the fat pads. So I'm going to add a little bit of volume there, there, and there. Now, the main finger is usually a little bit round on the tip, right? So we got this like very nice effect because we're gonna have the nail bed on this area. So again, with clay buildup, I'm gonna build this area up, and with trim dynamic, I'm gonna remove the area where I would expect to see the nail bed, which, as you can see, starts giving us this very nice like finger shape for our character. Now, since our character is stylized, I'm gonna keep the sharp angles a little bit more intensely. I do think this finger is a little bit thin, so I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger, like wider, because this guy's supposed to be like a monster, right? So let's do that a little bit there. Now, the nails we're gonna do later. We don't want to include the nails on the fingers. Some people, and in some pipelines, you might have to do that, like include the nails on the finger, but it usually looks very like overlapped, so I don't particularly love it, to be honest. However, we can start again polishing here, just trim dynamic, and polishing the finger. On this area right here, I'm also going to give it a little bit more roundness. And we want to make sure that the finger looks proportional. Now, if this happens to you where you can't make the brush bigger, I've mentioned this before, you need to turn off this thing called the dynamic option. So just press Control and click, and that's going to like remove that constraint. So let's start pushing this right there. And we're going to give this even more like sculpture later on. Right now, I just want to make sure it looks as nice as possible. I feel like we need to make it a little bit bigger here on the base of the fingers. Now, it's very important that this first finger like looks the best possible way that we can, because we're going to be making a brush. We're going to make an insert multi-mesh brush. Remember we talked about those before, which are these brushes that we can use to insert different elements like the teeth and the gums. Well, we're going to create our own multi-mesh brush here so that anytime we need the base mesh for a finger, we can use this one. Now, technically, we could spend like an hour like sculpting this finger to perfection and making sure that it has all of the wrinkles and all of the pores and everything, and just use that as a multi-mesh. But from experience, like fingers are a little bit different as well between each other. So I don't want to like commit myself to making just one perfect finger and then duplicating 5 times because it might look a little bit weird. So there we go. That's a lot better. I'm still going to like tweak things around here. I feel like the finger's a little bit too long. So I'm going to make it a little bit shorter by scaling. I'm going to reset this. I'm just going to scale it a little bit right there. And it's very important that we try to measure this as nicely as possible. There we go. That looks good. Now, keep in mind that the insertion point of the fingers, it's a little bit difficult here with the camera, but the insertion point of the fingers is actually like not halfway, but a little bit into the square that we have. So we're not going to be seeing like this full length of the finger on the hand. It's going to insert like right around there because the knuckle is going to be like on this area right here. So you can see this hand on the back side. That's where we're going to see the knuckle. And I would say that this is a good reference on how far we want to push the hand for this particular character. So let me increase the base here a little bit more. And now let's make our insert multi-mesh. So this finger base mesh that we have right here, we're going to convert it into a multi-mesh so that we can insert it and prepare the hand accordingly in our main character. And the way to do it is very simple. We're going to go here to our brushes. Make sure the finger is pointing towards you. We're going to go here to the brushes and we're just going to say create insert mesh. I'm going to say new. And that's it. Now we got an insert multi-mesh. Anytime we draw, we're going to be dragging and creating this finger right here for ourselves. So once we have this, we can go to our Oni over here, go to this area, for instance, and insert one mesh. Just be careful with the insert multi-meshes. Once you're dragging out and creating the finger, don't go back because you might get some weird like scales, as you can see right there. So you want to just drag and make sure that you got like a nice shape. And if you don't like it, just go into transform and modify it right here. So this one's going to be the index finger. Very important. We do want to have all of the fingers kind of like facing in the same direction. So sometimes when we do this, we can make the fingers like rotate on their own axis. We don't want that. In this case, I do want to keep it fairly consistent. So as you can see right here, this is what I was talking about. The insertion point of the finger is not going to be perfectly on the hand. It's going to be a little bit in because this is where we're going to have the knuckle. So that's going to be my first finger. Then I'm going to control and shift to do the next one. And this one, I'm just going to scale and maybe make it a little bit longer. Just push it out. Rotate on y-axis only because, again, I want all of the fingers to be facing the same direction. And just like get this as close as possible to where we want. Normally, when the hand is resting, every single finger, starting from the index and all the way down, they're going to curve in a little bit more. And I do like that sort of like a gesture that we normally get. So I'm going to do that. I am gonna invert the mask because usually, actually no, let's just do this. I was gonna say that usually the third finger is very similar in size to the index, so these two guys are really close in size. So I'm just gonna make this or scale this a little bit to match. Let's go. Oh, there we go. So this one is gonna rotate on the x-axis a little bit more. And very important, we do want to leave a little bit of a gap between fingers. Very common mistake is people see their hands and they see this sort of like V shape, but in reality, there's always a little bit of space between fingers. So I do want to respect that quite a bit here with my character. Now for the pinky finger, I'm going to duplicate again, and you can see that we're kind of like running out of space. It doesn't mean that our fingers are wrong. It just means that maybe our hand is too small for this size of fingers that we want to have. Now, the pinky finger sits a little bit higher on the depth of the hand. So I'm going to go there. There we go. And this one sits a little bit lower, like right around there. And you can see how we can create this very cool effect where fingers are kind of like fanning out and creating this claw shape. And yeah, generating a very nice effect. Now I'm going to duplicate once more. And this is going to be, of course, the thumb. Now, the thumb does rotate in its axis, and as we've mentioned before, we're actually just going to have two, let's center the pivot point, two phalanges for this one. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I'm not sure why the pivot point is like rotating weirdly. There we go. I'm going to scale this to make it a little bit fatter. Rotate it around. And get it into position. So as you can see, when we have the hand like this, the thumb roughly like lands on the beginning of all of the other fingers. So this tells me that this thumb is a little bit too high up. So I'm gonna push this. There we go. That's a little bit better, I think. Cool. So with this, the thumb, we're going to rotate a little bit. We can even use this as the metacarpal just to get an idea of where the thumb is going to be. And there we go. I'm going to remove the mask, and I'm going to, of course, grab the body itself, mask it, invert the mask, and since we have the fingers hidden or masked, I can like start playing around with the shape of the hand to make sure that this hand reads and holds most of the fingers in the best possible way. If we need to make the wrist a little bit bigger, this is also a good moment to do so. Now, I definitely feel like the fingers might be a little bit too big. I mean, it looks like a cool character, but I think they're a little bit too big. So I'm going to go to Unmask Center. I'm going to scale the fingers down a little bit. And then I should be able to just position them a little bit closer to the distance and the size that they were supposed to have. Remember that this is just a blocking, so there will be adjustments that we're going to be doing. But we want to have like most of the things on the place where we would expect. We can also use, for instance, the move topological BMT to move like only a specific finger, such as the thumb right here. And start playing around with the general shape. Make sure to keep it as symmetrical as possible. And yeah, this looks good. I think we're in a good position here. So again, always context, right? Like we need to look at the hands and be like, does this look like a normal hand? And I think it does. I do feel like there's a lot of volume here, so I'm going to start using a little bit of trim dynamic to blend this volume in. Sorry. So we're going to blend this volume right here a little bit, very, very softly. We can even just like smooth right there. I'm not sure why it's doing it so aggressively. And then on this part, we could even start like drawing a little bit of the knuckles. I feel like either my tablet or something is acting weird. But there we go. So usually, again, the size of the palm is going to be roughly the same size of the fingers. So that's one of the proportions that I'm taking into account when building this hand. But that looks really cool. I mean, those are definitely big hands, but they look really, really, really nice. So I'm going to press, again, all the groups to make sure that everything has its own group. And we Dynamesh, and that's going to combine the hands to our character. Of course, we're not done with the hand. Here's where I'm gonna grab my clay buildup, for instance, and we're gonna start adding the volume that we would expect to have in several of these parts. So for instance here, that's where the main mass of the hand would be. Over here, as I was just saying, we're going to have like the knuckles, so we're just going to add a little bit of volume here. But you're going to see that something interesting is happening with the hands, and that's the fact that we don't have enough resolution to really get in there and create all the details. You can even see that due to the Dynamesh, we got a little bit of a webbing right there. That's why I like to like work in this sort of like stages process, because I don't want to just increase the Dynamesh resolution right now to get more resolution for my hands when I'm not ready on other parts of the body. So doing this initial blocking is a good way to keep myself kind of like controlled and make sure that when we add the geometry, we're going to be able to polish all of these areas. You can see, look at that curvature right there. That's an excellent curvature. Definitely need to work a little bit on the fingers, like modify them a little bit. And even if we need to redo the knuckles or redo the phalanges, that's fine. As long as we got like the main shape on this stage, we're going to be in a good position. And we can compare it, right? Like we can bring in, let's say, Oni number 3. This is the old hand that we have. And you can see how the shape of the hand now looks way, way, way more complete and interesting. I'm going to add a little bit of volume here on the back of the hand, because I do like that curvature, but I feel like it was looking a little bit too bland. And one of the cool things about this concept, where's the concept, by the way? Oh, over here. There we go. One of the cool things about this concept is, as you can see, the hands, they have bandages and they have like all of this armor pieces. So we're going to be able to actually divide or separate the hands and keep them as different subtools so that we can add more resolution to that specific part. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Finally, just because this might be something that some of you might face, if your fingers become too thin, you can use the inflate brush. Inflate is a great brush to, as the name implies, inflate the element and add a little bit more volume. And later on when we polish, we're going to be able to modify that volume. So if you feel some of your fingers look a little bit too thin, or the hand in general looks a little bit too thin, the inflate brush is an excellent way to do it. And that's it for this one. So I'm going to save this real quick as Oni 5. And we're going to do something similar. Not exactly the same, but we're going to do something similar for the feet. Because this character, curiously, I think this is one of the first characters, or not one of the first, but one of the few characters where we're actually going to have to do the whole like foot. So I'm going to show you another technique where we can do something like this. So yeah, hang on tight and I'll see you back on the next video.